All right, today we're digging into something so many of us do, shopping for a house online. But what happens after you click that button? Well, that's where a fascinating story of psychology, anxiety, and, high-stakes strategy really begins. I mean, come on, who hasn't been there? You're scrolling through listings, maybe late at night, and you see it, the one. It just might be perfect. So you fill out that little form, you click Contact Agent, and it feels like a really simple, straightforward thing to do. In your mind, you're just trying to set up a tour. That's it. A simple request for a specific time, a specific place. But what if I told you that simple little click is actually the starting pistol for something much, much bigger? Yep, that one click triggers a pretty sophisticated framework, one that's designed to understand and navigate your deepest fears about making one of the biggest purchases of your entire life. Okay, let's dive into this and see how it all really works. So, first things first, we have to get inside the head of the person who's actually making that click, because the modern home shopper isn't just a name and a database. They're in a very specific and often a very vulnerable state of mind. And here it is. This is probably the single most important stat you need to know to understand their behavior. According to Zillow's 2024 data, a staggering 44% of all homebuyers are first-timers. This huge number of inexperienced buyers, it's the absolute cornerstone of this entire psychological model. For these first-time buyers, their default setting is basically a potent cocktail of anxieties. They're worried about the massive financial hit. They are terrified of making a permanent mistake, something they can't undo. They're just completely overwhelmed by how complex the whole process is. And of course, they're wrestling with this idea of being tied to one place for maybe 30 years. So, with all that anxiety churning on the inside, how does it actually show up on the outside? Well, it creates this very specific behavior, what this research calls the just see the house mask. And this is a classic psychological defense, right? When you're facing something that's super complex, super intimidating, and you feel totally powerless, you simplify your world. You boil it all down to one single thing you can control, one tangible goal that makes you feel like you have some say in the matter. And in this case, that goal is just seeing the house. This is what that transactional mask sounds like in the real world. Now, the buyer isn't trying to be rude or difficult, they're just trying to manage their own anxiety. They don't see the agent as an advisor. They see them as a gatekeeper who literally holds the keys to the one thing they can focus on. Okay, so if you're the agent on the other side of this, and you're faced with this anxious, kind of distrustful buyer, how do you break through that wall? Well, you don't fight the mask, you work with it, using a really strategic conversational framework that's designed to systematically build trust. It's basically a four-stage funnel. First, you agree with them. Then you pivot the conversation to discovery. After that, you inject some real value. And finally, you close for a much deeper consultation. It's a clear roadmap for guiding a buyer from a state of high anxiety to one of real trust and rapport. Now, this first step is absolutely critical. The wrong way to do it is to immediately jump in with questions about their loan pre-approval or other houses they've seen. That just confirms their suspicion that you have your own agenda. The right way? Immediately agree to their request. It is such a powerful act of psychological disarming. It just tells the buyer, hey, I hear you, and I'm on your side. Only after you've given that validation does the agent start to pivot the conversation. They gently shift from talking about the what, the specific house, to understanding the why, the buyer's true motivations. Then they prove their worth. They offer unique value, things like knowing about special loans or off-market properties, and they transform from just a door opener into a real problem solver. But here's where it gets even more interesting. This whole funnel, it's not some rigid script. It has to be adapted because, not all anxious buyers are the same. In fact, they tend to fall into four very distinct personality archetypes. Now, what's really fascinating here is how this maps out the different approaches you need to take. For the analytical buyer, you've got to provide data and explain the process step by step. For a driver, you have to be direct and just focus on the results. For an amiable buyer, it's all about building rapport and offering gentle reassurance. And for an expressive, you match their energy and focus on the lifestyle, the vision. And this just shows the contrast perfectly, doesn't it? A driver is all about efficiency. Let's get straight to the point. An amiable, on the other hand, is motivated by trust and harmony. They need validation. They need that reassurance. You simply cannot talk to these two people the same way and expect to get anywhere. So let's bring this all together. We have an anxious buyer, a 4-stage trust funnel, and 4 different personalities to adapt to. And believe it or not, this entire psychological framework is now being used to train artificial intelligence. So, the crucial point is this. When agents are training with these AI role-playing avatars that are built on these principles, the AI is literally programmed with a goal. It's tracking its own internal trust level on a scale from 1 to 10. The agent's conversation is only considered a success if they can get that AI's trust level up to a 7 or higher. Trust becomes this clear, measurable outcome. And it's so important to understand the real principle here. The objective isn't to trick someone into a sale. It's about providing genuine help. It's about systematically reducing that buyer's anxiety, managing their cognitive load, and turning what is a terrifyingly complex process into a safe, guided journey. Which kind of leaves us with one final thought. When you deconstruct human anxiety so systematically that you can actually teach a machine how to respond to it, have you just created a masterclass in sales? Or have you actually created a really powerful lesson in tactical empathy? Something to think about.